Live from WCVB Channel 5 Boston with our partners, the Boston Globe, WBUR, the UMass Boston McCormick Graduate School, and Western Mass News. This is a Commitment 2018 special, the Massachusetts Governor's Debate. And now, tonight's moderators, WBUR's Bob Oakes and News Center 5's Maria Stefanos.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the final debate in the race for governor.
Election Day is Tuesday, and two candidates are on the ballot. Incumbent Republican Governor Charlie Baker, running for his second term, and challenger Democrat Jay Gonzalez. We appreciate both of you being here tonight.
Yes, thank you. And a panel of three veteran journalists will be asking the questions. Adrian Walker, columnist with the Boston Globe. From WCVB's On the Record, our Janet Wu. And WBUR's senior political reporter, Anthony Brooks. Spanish secondary audio, by the way, is available with tonight's broadcast. The candidates, you'll have 1 minute to respond to questions, 30 seconds for rebuttals.
So now we begin. A coin toss decided the order of the opening and the closing statements. Mr. Gonzalez, you're first. You have the 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm running for governor because I care about people and I want to make a difference in people's lives. And I believe in our potential to do so. I'm the son of a young immigrant from Spain and a mother who dropped out of college to take care of me. They overcame extraordinary challenges by working hard, believing in themselves, and supporting each other along the way. Those values I learned from my parents are our values, American values. We have always believed in the little guy. We've always believed we can overcome any challenge if we put our mind to it and work for it. And that is certainly true right here in Massachusetts, where we've always been a progressive leader. I want us to be who we are, to aim high, to take on the big challenges that are holding working families back in this state, to stand up for every single person and to make Massachusetts a leader again. I have an ambitious agenda to do exactly that. I will make a difference for working families in this state, and I will stand up against Donald Trump's hateful agenda.
Governor Baker, your turn, 1 minute.
Well, good evening, and let me start by thanking the Media Consortium, and I want to thank the viewing audience, as well as the people of Massachusetts, for giving Karen Polito and me this opportunity to serve as Lieutenant Governor and Governor. This has been the opportunity of a lifetime. Massachusetts is heading in the right direction. Our economy is booming, our schools are great, and the collaborative approach to leadership that we've brought has solved problems and made things possible in communities across the Commonwealth. That's why so many mayors and other local officials are endorsing our reelection. We've also fought the opioid epidemic, invested in offshore wind, and fought climate change, and by doing so, created national models. We fixed the Health Connector, invested in a shattered Department of Children and Families, and found permanent housing for 1,500 families that were in hotels and motels when we took office, proving that government can get it done for the people who need it to work most. We have much to do on opioids, transportation, housing, economic development, you name it. But I believe we've proven that our approach to working together can get things done.
All right, let's begin. Janet, let's talk about the Merrimack Valley.
For the first time today, the word criminal was used in reference to the gas explosions there. The U.S. Attorney's Office has launched an investigation. More than 5,000 customers are still suffering without heat and hot water tonight. Mr. Gonzalez, you've been pretty critical of the pace, but it's easy to criticize. So I want you to give us some concrete examples of things that you would have done instead.
Well, first of all, it is a tragedy. I've been to Lawrence 3 times in the last week and met with people who've been affected by this, who don't have gas service in their homes, businesses that are losing money and their businesses are in danger because of this. It's a real tragedy. It should have never happened to begin with. We should have had stronger oversight of our gas companies, and I would hire many more people to oversee our gas companies and our gas infrastructure in this state to keep people safe. But the fact that this has now been delayed for an extra month is a real problem. There are going to be people who can't be in their homes during the cold, and it's not okay. I think we need many more people, obviously, getting all these houses ready. And we should have been all over the gas company. It feels like we've trusted the gas company to take care of this. And I think the governor needs to take charge and get on top of it and own it and manage it so that this is being addressed like the emergency it is for the people in Lawrence.
Governor, you just heard Mr. Gonzalez. He says you've been too trusting of the gas companies, that there should have been stronger oversight. Do you take any responsibility for this? Well,
first of all, what's going on up there was a tragedy, is a tragedy, and it's enormously frustrating for everybody involved. I've been up there quite a bit myself. Within 24 hours of the original explosions, I signed an emergency declaration, and I took over the process of doing the immediate restoration project and gave that to Eversource and took it away from Columbia. We also put together an oversight team to oversee the work associated with both rebuilding the mainline pipe, doing the service line work, and the house-to-house work. And many people said we'd never get any of that done by November 19th. Well, the good news is the mainline pipe is relayed, the service lines are going to get done, and the big challenge that faces us now is the house-to-house stuff, which is enormously complicated. But the bottom line is, by working with the fire marshals, the fire chiefs, and a whole bunch of other people in the inspectional and electrician and plumber field, we do believe we're making progress, and we're going to hit that second deadline.
But should your oversight have been stronger before this happened?
Well, the NTSB is doing a comprehensive review. I actually talked to them around 3 o'clock in the morning up in Lawrence on the night of the original explosions and said to them, we give them any help they needed on anything. We also spent time talking to the Attorney General, Maura Healey, who put a requirement in that no documents associated with any of this could be destroyed, and they all had to be retained. And we plan to hold everybody who needs to be held accountable for what's going on up in the Merrimack Valley. Absolutely.
Mr. Gonzalez.
The bad news is for the people in the affected area who aren't going to have gas service for an extra month now, because not enough has been done quickly enough. And let me say, there wasn't enough oversight before. There were 2 gas inspectors. The federal government warned the Baker administration about this weeks before this incident for 21,500 miles of gas pipeline infrastructure. This is the same old Republican playbook of smaller government. Government does really important things like protecting people, and we need to be protecting people from natural gas pipeline explosions like this.
Another utility question now from Anthony Brooks on National Grid.
Governor Baker, in the national grid lockout, you've made efforts to bring both sides together, but 4 months in, workers are still off the job. You say you're worried about safety issues, among other issues. So what's your administration doing to end this standoff?
Well, first of all, we've encouraged both sides to get together and to end it, and we have mediated discussions between both sides. I think the most important thing we've done is put a moratorium in place that basically says, because of the lack of manpower and the lack of resources available to National Grid because of the lockout, that they can't do anything other than what I would describe as statutory work and emergency service work. It's my hope that that will prod National Grid and the steelworkers to come together and get this deal done. The one thing we did do to make sure it was possible to bring those folks up to the Merrimack Valley is we ensured that all the paperwork that needed to be done to make it possible for those locked out workers to work up in the Merrimack Valley and get paid to do so was put in place. I think it's fair to say everybody wants to see this lockout end. And I do believe by holding National Grid's feet to the fire with respect to not permitting them to do anything other than their statutory work and emergency repairs, that is going to move the debate and the discussion forward for them.
Mr. Gonzalez, what's missing from the governor's response? What would you have done anything different if you had been governor?
I would have intervened immediately, months ago. The way the workers are being treated by National Grid is reprehensible. They were locked out of their jobs, not being paid, health insurance taken away from them and their families. Put aside the safety concerns that with the work that the temporary workers are doing, where hundreds of complaints were filed with the governor's Department of Public Utilities weeks before the Merrimack Valley disaster with no response. I went with the workers, the locked out workers, to the Department of Public Utilities to express concern about the safety violations. But they've been treated reprehensibly, and there are real consequences to this. So I would have intervened immediately. And I want to say, I know the executives of the gas companies and the other utilities are filling Governor Baker's campaign coffers. I am in this to fight for all the working families in this state, all the little guys like these workers who've been locked out of their jobs, and that's who I'm going to fight for as governor.
Governor Baker, can you give us a drop-dead date for when you want a new contract reached between the two parties and when you want those workers back on the job?
Well, I would like them back on the job now, and the reason we put the constraints around the work that National Grid was allowed to do was because, A, we were concerned about the safety issues. The DPU, in fact, several weeks ago, issued a lengthy memo to National Grid about safety concerns they had with respect to their work that we're still waiting for National Grid to respond to. But the best way, we believe, we can participate in this process to ensure they're not doing anything that they're not qualified to do when they're working shorthand, which is what they're doing now.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Yeah, one other thing to add to this. There's a big difference between the governor and myself on energy needs generally. He supports expanding natural gas pipeline infrastructure in this state. I strongly oppose it. I will do everything in my power as governor to prevent the expansion of natural gas pipeline infrastructure here. We don't need it. It will just further our dependence on fossil fuels. And as we've been reminded by the Merrimack Valley incident, it is dangerous. So this is a big difference between the two of us that I think people should be aware of.
Governor Baker, do you want to quickly respond to this?
Well, first of all, I just want to point out that our administration is the one that created an offshore wind industry on the east coast of the United States. The procurement that we did, working with our colleagues in the legislature to put that plan together, shocked everyone when it came out with the price point on it. And as a result, Connecticut jumped in, Rhode Island jumped in, New York, New Jersey, Virginia, Delaware, all the way down the coast. The fastest way to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels is to create affordable alternatives. And we've moved that ball way down the field.
All right, we need to move on. This question comes from Sadia Ahmad, recent graduate at UMass Boston's McCormick Graduate School of Public Policy. And here's the question. What do you see as the governor's role in preventing hate crimes like the mass killings at the Pittsburgh synagogue? Mr. Gonzalez, you're up on this.
I think it's more important than ever that we have public leaders, including a governor, who is speaking out forcefully against hate crimes. The tragedy in Pittsburgh was a despicable act of hate and violence. And our president is inciting this type of conduct with his hateful and divisive language. And we need public leaders who are going to stand up forcefully against it. I went recently to stand with members of the community in Reading, where they recently found 2 swastikas in their high school. I went last weekend to a rally with transgender people who were rallying to not only pass question 3, but against hate. We're living in a really difficult time right now, and we need public leaders who are being forceful and standing up to the types of comments our president makes.
Are you saying, I want to interrupt, are you saying that Governor Baker has not stood up?
I don't think he's done enough, no. In speaking out against our president, no.
Governor Baker.
Well, let me start by saying that one of the things we did as an administration about 2 years ago when we saw the spike in hate crimes was we put a task force together. And that task force has members of the faith community, the law enforcement community, and the education community. They meet on a regular basis. They engage in others' discussions around sharing intelligence, awareness, best practices, and other kinds of opportunities to improve the way we all deal with these issues. And first of all, I think that's the most important thing you need to do. Create a mechanism, a vehicle through which all of the affected players who can participate and prevent this sort of thing from happening to engage in that discussion. The second thing you do is you continue to build on the bipartisan efforts that have been pursued here around gun control. We were one of the first states in the country to eliminate bump stocks after that horrible tragedy in Nevada. We're also one of the few states in the country to pass extreme risk protection order legislation. And many times, I had people, John Rosenthal from Stop Handgun Violence in my office today, talking about the work that's been done here in the Commonwealth on gun control and things we can do going forward. But I happen to think that the things we do that are effective are every bit as important as what we say. And I've stood up and spoken out against the president on numerous occasions because his language in many cases is destructive and appalling. And
you disagree with that?
I do, and you know, I do think it matters what you say as governor, and also what you do. Some of the gun legislation, the common sense gun laws that were put in place happened in spite of Governor Baker, not because of his leadership. And Governor, you are supporting Maura Healey's opponent, Jay McMahon, to replace her as Attorney General, who has said he believes there's a God-given right to assault weapons, who recently said immigrants are savages. Talk about hate. Why do you think he would be a better Attorney General than Maura Healey?
First of all, with respect to my position on whether I supported or encouraged or watch from behind with respect to our gun laws here in the Commonwealth. I was the first governor in the country to talk about the importance of getting rid of bump stocks. And I work collaboratively with my colleagues in the legislature on both that legislation and on ERPO. And I have a D rating from the NRA and an F from Goal. And I was proud to have the endorsement of Everytown for Gun Safety, which is one of the largest and most important gun control advocacy groups in the United States.
Well, Governor, why do you think Jay McMahon will be a better Attorney General than Maura Healey?
I've worked closely with the Attorney General on all kinds of issues, and we've had a good working relationship. But I said months ago I was going to support the ticket, and I'm going to live up to my commitment on that.
So you believe he would be a better Attorney General than her?
I said I was going to support the ticket. But as I said, I've worked carefully and closely with the Attorney General on a variety of issues. We have a good working relationship.
So this is important, because the governor is saying his loyalties to the Republican Party, regardless of the consequences, regardless of having someone who's going to go in to be our Attorney General or to replace Elizabeth Warren in the United States Senate, who's anti-choice, who is anti-common sense gun laws, anti a lot of the stuff you say you're for. And if you were really committed to common sense gun laws, you wouldn't be asking the people of this state, and you personally wouldn't be voting to support them, to put them in office.
I think it's pretty clear where I am on common sense gun laws. And by the way, this isn't a race for Attorney General. It's not a race for the U.S. Senate. It's a race for governor. And I'll put my track record on these issues up against anybody.
This is important. It is a race for governor. I know that. But you just have proved my point, Governor. You don't think it matters. And we've got a president right now who is threatening our values, who is taking this country backwards, who's threatening our democracy. And you are putting loyalty to the Republican Party above your commitment to these values.
Governor Baker,
and I think it matters, which is why I'm running for governor and not some other place, because I think we need a governor who's going to stand up and be consistent on these issues.
15 seconds, and then we have to move on.
I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I don't plan to vote for him if he runs for re-election. Most people know where I'm coming from with respect to the president. On numerous issues, I've worked collaboratively with Democrats and Republicans to repel and appeal and work against a series of his initiatives. And I would add, in many cases, we've been successful. And I think in some respects, our ability to succeed and be effective on these issues really makes a difference for people here in Massachusetts.
All right, this is basically still on topic. Adrian.
Governor Baker, you said that you'll vote for U.S. Senate candidate Jeff Deal, who says he'd have President Trump's back in Washington. How can you support him and be committed to women's rights, abortion rights, gun control, LGBTQ rights, and the Affordable Care Act?
Well, let's start with the Affordable Care Act. That's one where I put together a coalition, worked with my colleagues in other state houses and state capitals and other members of the House and Senate, Democrats and Republicans, to succeed in preventing Massachusetts from losing $1 billion in federal revenue if the Affordable Care Act had been repealed. We did similar things with respect to the National Institute of Health, part of a big coalition that also involved Senator Warren, where we went from a cut in National Institute of Health funding to actually an increase, which here in Massachusetts, with all the money and effort and energy that we put around discovery, really makes a difference. Time and time again on immigration, DACA, TPS, and a whole series of issues, I've worked collaboratively with my colleagues across the aisle to push back against presidential policies that I don't support. That said, I said at the very beginning of the campaign, months and months ago, that I would support the ticket, and I plan to honor my word on that.
Just to be clear, Governor, are you asking all your supporters, including many Democrats and independents, to vote for Deal as well?
I'm saying that I'm supporting the ticket. He has to run his race, we have to run ours. People will make whatever they think is the best decision for Massachusetts, as they should.
And just to be clear, when Governor Baker says he's supporting the ticket, he doesn't use this word, but he's supporting the Republican ticket. And he, best I can tell from his answers, he's blindly supporting the Republican ticket no matter what the consequences. No matter that we would be sending the co-chair of Donald Trump's campaign in Massachusetts to the United States Senate, who would do everything in his power to undo a woman's right to choose, and support the NRA's agenda, and undo LGBTQ rights, and be a rubber stamp for Donald Trump's agenda. And to put someone in to replace Maura Healey, who believes there's a God-given right to assault weapons, and who describes immigrants as savages, you can't have it both ways. And I will be a governor who stands for a woman's right to choose and LGBTQ rights and common sense gun laws, not just some of the time, but all of the time.
Do you want to follow up on that, Governor?
I'd just say I've supported women's reproductive rights for my entire political career, and I take great pride in the fact that Planned Parenthood stayed neutral in this race because they appreciate a lot of the work we've done to protect women's reproductive rights here in Massachusetts.
And
I signed the transgender legislation. I'm supporting Question 3. I've raised money for Question 3, and I've donated to the campaign myself. I have a long track record on these issues. People in Massachusetts understand that. I think it's one of the reasons why we've gotten the endorsement of some of the largest gun control organizations in the country, and many Democrats and independents who've come out and supported us because they believe we've been doing the things that matter and are most important for people here in the Commonwealth.
Hang on, we want to talk about the Me Too movement. Janet Wu has the next question.
You've both been the top guy, the boss of private and public organizations. With all the stories surfacing now about sexual harassment from years past, is there any incident in the workplace, when you reach back into your memory bank, that you feel that you should have confronted differently? Mr. Gonzalez, you go first.
No, there isn't. I've never been confronted as in a leadership position with a situation where somebody's said they've been harassed or treated in a way that's inappropriate. This is a huge problem, though. I mean, the Me Too movement has shown us that this is a sickness in our culture, and we have been tolerating the intolerable for way too long, and we need to stand up against it. One of the things that I've said I would do and have been very clear about is I think the license for the Wynn Casino should be revoked. The company knew about Steve Wynn's abhorrent criminal conduct. They did nothing about it. They didn't disclose it to the Gaming Commission. They are not suitable, that company, to hold the license in Massachusetts, because we need to hold not only the people who engage in this conduct accountable, we need to hold the institutions who enable it accountable. And I will do that as governor.
Mr. Gonzalez says he's never seen any examples of harassment under his leadership. What about you, Governor?
Well, what I would say, first of all, is any leadership role I've ever had, we've had a zero tolerance policy with respect to this. And we've always made sure that people knew, both during my time in state government and my time in the private sector, who they could reach out to and talk to if they wanted to raise a concern. Either a 1-800 number with an anonymous call or the names of specific people at a state agency or a department in a private company where people could go. And if anybody raised any allegations or issues with respect to that, we immediately investigated them and dealt with them accordingly. In some cases, if we needed to go outside to get independent investigators involved, we did that as well. But I think the best and most important thing you can do here is make clear to people you have a zero tolerance policy. And then if people actually do come forward and raise issues and concerns, deal with them quickly, deal with them appropriately, and ensure that there's discretion and protection for the people who come forward.
All right, we're going to move on to the speed round part of our debate. A little change right here. Short questions, and yes, we're looking for short answers, mostly a yes or no, if you'd be so kind. Mr. Gonzalez, once recreational pot shops open, would you be okay with having marijuana in your house? Yes or no?
No.
Governor Baker?
I'm with my opponent on this one.
Okay. Well, let's see what happens with the next question. Governor Baker, Boston hotel workers are striking. Who do you side with, the employees or the businesses?
I'm a big fan of Unite Local, and we actually moved our election night activities out of one of the hotels that they were striking in front of.
So the employees?
We're with the employees.
Okay, Mr. Gonzalez?
I've picketed with the employees 5 times.
So that's
because I stand with them, and as governor, I'm going to stand with working people like them.
Mr. Gonzalez, Governor Baker does not accept a $65,000 housing allowance, rejected that $33,000 pay raise. If you are elected as governor of the Commonwealth, would you also reject them?
I've been clear that I will take whatever the salary and compensation is. I'm not going to seek anything different.
You'll continue to reject them?
No, I opposed that then because I hated the process that the legislature went through to deliver on it, and I didn't feel that the Commonwealth was in a position to deal with it. But it's now the statutory requirement here in Massachusetts.
So you'll take it?
That's what it is, and the voters are kind enough to give me a second term. I'll just take it because that's what it is. Governor
Baker, the idea of building a seawall around Boston, do you support that?
I actually read the study that was done by the UMass Boston folks on this issue. It was pretty comprehensive and pretty effective.
Yes or no?
Let me just finish. It makes a heck. You said you would give us a little room.
All right, a little.
Okay. It makes a heck of a strong case for why that's probably not the most effective way to deal with this. What I would say is we have a planning program in place for all 351 cities and towns doing vulnerability planning, including Boston. And a lot of what Boston has already talked about came out of that process. This is an enormous issue. I'd put it at the very top of the pile with respect to things we need to work on if we're fortunate enough to have a second term.
Mr. Gonzalez.
I don't know about the seawall, but we need to do everything we possibly can as urgently as possible to protect our property and people from climate change.
Let's try to keep this to a yes or no.
Sorry.
That's okay. Mr. Gonzalez, do you support the long-discussed idea of a rail link between North and South Station?
Yes, I do.
Governor Baker.
I support doing whatever provides the best opportunity to get people from where they are to where they're trying to go. And we did a big study on this. It suggested that the price tag was somewhere between $15 and $20 billion. There are a whole bunch of other ways to solve this problem, many
yes
of
or
which
no?
we're currently looking at. I think it's important to solve the link problem. I'm just not sure if that's exactly the way I would choose to solve it.
All right, let's stay on transportation and talk about traffic. Adrian Walker has the question.
Governor Baker, traffic is getting worse every year. AAA says we have the 5th longest commute in the country. Is it time to expand tolls on more major highways, or do you have other ideas for cutting traffic?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is to follow through on the $8 billion plan we've got for the MBTA. That will increase the capacity on the system on the orange line and the red line by about 50% during rush hour and about 15% on the green line, and significantly increase our ability to expand commuter rail service as well. If you can't give people a reliable, dependable alternative, the likelihood you get them off the road is going to be dramatically limited. From my point of view, the work that the Fiscal Management Control Board and our administration has done, setting the T up to be in a position where it's finally making the investments it should have made 15 or 20 years ago in its system, where everything is more than 50 years old, I think is the right way to go. And if you really want to get people off the roads, you got to make sure you're making those investments in public transportation. The other thing I would say is we've added 225,000 jobs to our economy over the course of the past 4 years, and that certainly has had something to do with the traffic as well.
Mr. Gonzalez, same question. What should we do about traffic?
I've said I'd be open to variable rate tolling, which the governor opposed, but we absolutely need to fix our public transit system, and the governor's not doing nearly enough. He's taken a status quo approach, refuses to acknowledge we need additional revenue to fix our transit system, not just the MBTA, but regional bus service all across the state, which he keeps trying to cut funding for. The governor's plan is that the T will be in a state of good repair in 15 years, and it turns out that that's not even his plan. Based on a filing with the federal government, he doesn't have a way to fund that, and it's more like 25 years. 15 years is ridiculous. I will have a sense of urgency around this. I have a plan to raise $3 billion from the wealthy to invest in transportation and education, and I've been very open and honest about the fact that we need to do that and treat this with a sense of urgency to get this done, because we are failing the people of Massachusetts.
This topic is a perfect segue for our next question, Anthony Brooks.
Yes, Mr. Gonzalez, as you mentioned, you've proposed these big investments in transportation, and to pay for them, you want higher taxes on the wealthy, a tax on private college endowments. But leaders of your own party have shown very little appetite for these kinds of tax hikes. Doesn't that resistance imperil your big plans to improve transportation, including fixing the T?
I'm unaware of any leaders of our party who said they're opposed to it. In fact, the legislature voted twice to put the millionaire's tax, one of my proposals, on the ballot. The endowment tax that I proposed on the wealthiest universities in this state is a fair proposal that would raise $1 billion a year for education and transportation. And I believe the universities can afford it, and it would make a huge difference for working families across this state who are my top priority. And look, we are failing working people. We have one of the worst transportation systems in the country. Our education system is failing too many of our young kids. We have to get serious about this. I am not running for governor to manage the status quo. I am running to make a difference for people. I'm going to be honest about what we need to do, and I'm going to deliver on it.
But Mr. Gonzalez, do you think you can get Speaker DeLeo, for example, to agree to this plan?
I think we can get the legislature. I have a track record of working successfully with the legislature on a lot of big initiatives when I worked in the Patrick administration. And I think the legislature, based on my conversations with people, understands we need to invest more in our transportation system and education system. And this is a big difference between Governor Baker and myself. I have a specific proposal. I will be open if people have better ideas, as long as it's raising taxes on the wealthy and not working people. But Governor Baker's plan is zero. And zero is not going to get us to where we need to be.
So, Governor Baker, a question that's, of course, related to this. As has been mentioned, you've increased investments in maintenance. You've reformed fiscal management of the T. But as was mentioned, this is going to take at least 15 years to upgrade a lot of the T's aging infrastructure. Can you tell frustrated riders tonight what you can do to fix the T sooner?
Well, first of all, we started with a system that had a 25-year repair backlog when we took office because, among other things, when my opponent was running the budget office, they left $1.5 billion unspent, and the repair backlog basically doubled. The fact that the backlog is now down to 15 years is a result of the fact that over the last 2 years, we spent more on the state of good repair than in any 2-year period in recent history. The stuff that people really care about, the extension and expansion of the orange line and the red line, and the investment in the green line, that stuff's coming in the next 12 to 24 months. In addition to that, the signal projects, the system projects, the electric power systems, that's all coming in the next 24 months too. Remember, when people talk about a state good repair, that's literally replacing everything. Every station, every track, every third rail, everything. That stuff will eventually happen, but the bottom line is people will see real improvements over the course of the next couple of years.
Mr. Gonzalez.
In 2015, the governor said that his performance should be measured based on the reliability and dependability of the MBTA. So how about this? If you believe that your commute is better now than it was 4 years ago, then you should vote for Charlie Baker. But if you want someone who's going to actually take this on and be honest about the fact that we need to invest more and is going to work with a sense of urgency to fix it, then I am your guy.
Can I just say that for quite a while I've been hearing my opponent talk about the big investments he wants to make in the T. He has no capacity to pay for those. It's so dishonest to say to the people that he can fund the north-south rail link, that he can fund east-west.
How are you going to pay for them?
Fund the blue line
how are you
to Lynn, that he can fund the red line expansion. These are tens of billions of dollars of projects for which he's offering plans that many of which don't start until 4 years from now to generate any revenue. And the $1 billion, as you point out, Anthony, may not ever come to pass. We're talking about spending $8 billion on our current plan over the next 5 years, which will be more than double what's ever been spent in the T's history because we cleaned up its financial operations, because we found ways to do work on a pay-go basis, because we created the capital infrastructure to actually execute on a plan. Our plan is real, and it's specific, and it's detailed. What he's talking about just doesn't exist.
Mr. Gonzalez, how are you going to pay for it?
You're able to make the investments you're making because Governor Patrick raised taxes to invest in transportation. And that's why you've got additional money, but it's not nearly enough. And you don't have a plan. You say your plan is you're going to fix the T in 15 years. You filed a report with the federal government two months later that says your plan is more like 25 years.
So can I just respond to this?
But I have a specific plan to raise $3 billion each year from the wealthy. And whether it's enough or not to do everything that I've said, which I believe it is $3 billion more than zero, which is his plan.
Go ahead, Governor.
His $3 billion plan starts in 2023. That's at the end of our 5 years of investing $8 billion in the T's infrastructure. That's point number one. Point number two is the 25 years he talks about, that's where we started. That's what we inherited from the previous administration. Because we managed to make significant investments in the state of good repair, in the repair backlog over the course of the past couple years, bigger than's ever been done since they've been keeping score. We took 10 years off the state of good repair. Over the course of the next couple of years, with the momentum we've created, it's really going to start to feel different to people as those orange line trains, the red line trains, and the signal and switch technology gets put into place. When you're dealing with a system where everything is 50 years old, the upgrades make an enormous difference with respect to reliability, capacity, and performance.
All right, we're going to move on to another issue.
All right.
Housing.
I'm sure my opponent and I would be happy to talk about this one all day.
Housing, Adrian.
Governor Baker, as you know, housing in Massachusetts ranks among the most expensive in the country. How can the state increase access to affordable housing, especially for working families who do not qualify for subsidized housing, but can afford market rate housing in areas close to jobs and good schools?
It's a really good question. Housing is one of the biggest problems we face as a Commonwealth. We used to do 30,000 new units of housing every year for like 40 years. And starting in the 90s, that number fell to about 8,000 to 10,000 a year. And for 25 years, we've been building less than half the new housing that we used to build every single year like clockwork, which means we don't have much inventory. When the inventory goes on the market, the prices go up, people can't afford it, and it pushes them farther and farther away from where they work to find a place they can afford to live. We worked with everybody in this space to create a plan to generate 135,000 new units of housing over the next 5 years to get us back into the business of doing housing production. Came out of committee 12-1. It's currently sitting in the House Ways and Means Committee. My hope is that the legislature will either act on that in the informal or take it up next year, because we have got to build more housing here in the Commonwealth. It's a #1 issue for me, and it's an issue that I believe we've got to solve from an equity point of view, an economic point of view, if we truly want to be a place where young families and young people and moderate income folks can afford to live.
Mr. Gonzalez, I have the same question for you.
This is a huge crisis in this state. I hear about it a lot on the campaign trail. I think our affordable housing crisis and our broken transportation system are the two things that are going to start dragging our economy backwards if we don't get serious about it. I'm going to provide bold leadership on this. I have said I will double the state's capital investment in affordable housing projects by prioritizing our capital investments. I'm going to do real regulatory reform. We need every community to be a part of this solution, because we are all going to start falling backwards if this drags our economy down. The governor's plan that he mentioned wasn't passed by the legislature, and it basically would have asked municipalities nicely to loosen their zoning rules to create more housing. We're going to be serious about this in my administration. I'm going to pass real regulatory reform that ensures we are increasing the housing supply across this state to deal with this crisis.
Governor Baker, quick response.
Well, how come you didn't do that when you were A&F secretary?
It wasn't my job. I was A&F secretary.
It wasn't your job to try and help us.
You've been governor for...
We've had a housing crisis here in the Commonwealth for a really long time. And during your term in office, nobody did anything to solve this problem. We actually increased the state's investment in affordable housing by 25% when we took office. We just signed the largest housing bond bill in state history. But the first serious attempt to actually do something about housing production here in Massachusetts was done by our administration. And it's still pending before the legislature. And I actually believe we have opportunities to get it done in the informal sector.
All right, Governor Baker had the first word on this, so you get the last word.
It's not a serious attempt, and the housing advocacy organizations describe it as a baby step or a mini step, which is consistent with the status quo approach.
They all endorsed it.
And I wasn't in charge of housing when I was the Secretary of Administration and Finance, but I will take responsibility for it when I'm governor. You've been governor for 4 years. You just proposed something on housing, which is a baby step, in your 3rd year. It's not good enough. This is a crisis in this state. And, you know, this is the 3rd debate that we've been in. You keep wanting to talk about the Deval-Patrick administration. I haven't heard you give a single proposal for what you're going to do as governor in the next 4 years.
All right, we're going to move on.
Can we talk about our $8 billion investment in public transportation over the next 4 years?
I think we did talk a little bit about that.
You're right. We did.
All right, we're on to another speed round now. And remember, this is super short, okay? In fact, the first question is 3 words, 3-word answer. Mr. Gonzalez, 3 words to describe President Trump.
Hateful, racist, un-American.
Governor Baker, 3 words.
Only 3. Outrageous, disgraceful, and a divider.
Next question. Governor Baker, should the World Series Red Sox go to the White House?
I think that's completely up to the team. I mean, my guess is if they get asked, people will make whatever decision they think is best for them, and I think that's okay.
White House?
I'm going to invite them to the governor's office when I'm governor.
Okay. Mr. Gonzalez,
good luck getting them to come.
Mr. Gonzalez, who is your political hero?
Can I just ask, a living or dead?
Either.
Okay.
I don't have just one, but if I had to pick one, I would probably say Deval Patrick. I got to know him personally. He's the real deal. He was in it for the right reasons.
Okay.
And I have a lot of respect for him.
Okay, we got it. Governor Baker.
Abraham Lincoln. No one else is even close.
All right, Governor Baker, what's your favorite family tradition?
Christmas morning, everybody in their jammies, big pot of coffee, tons of breakfast, mostly made by our oldest son, who's a better cook than anybody else in the family. Sorry, Lauren. And
Okay.
and a lot of Christmas music. And
We're going to stop you here because we don't want to get you in more trouble with your wife.
Let's roast
Good job,
an open fire. Yeah.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Sunday night dinner. The campaign screwed this up a little bit, but it is the time usually when the entire family is all there with the kids, and we have dinner together and we actually talk.
Okay, Mr. Gonzalez, what's the #1 thing on your bucket list after politics?
I have no idea. Hanging out with my wife.
Governor Baker, bucket list after politics.
I would like to take a trip with my wife to some place she wants to go.
Good comeback.
This job, as Jay pointed out, these jobs sort of suck up a lot of time, and there's a lot of places she'd like to visit, and I'd like to take her to a couple of them.
All right, let's continue with the questions. Anthony.
Governor Baker, there is a Las Vegas-style casino in Springfield now, but many western Massachusetts towns don't have high-speed broadband service. It's 2018. What's your plan to give these communities the same opportunities as cities like Boston or Worcester?
So this issue came to the attention of both the Lieutenant Governor and me shortly after we took office. There were 53 communities in Western Mass that didn't have high-speed internet. And we put together a team, and we worked with the legislature to get additional funding to support this. And then we put together a menu that local communities out there could choose from to get to high-speed internet. And they're big swaths of geography. The topography in many of them is complicated. But of those 53, 50 of them either have it or have a plan that they're working on implementing in conjunction with us, and either with a local utility or a cable company, and we'll get the last 3 done. But our goal is to have all 53 of them with high-speed internet sooner rather than later. And when you talk to them about it, they will tell you that it's the difference between night and day for them. And we consider this to be a fundamental opportunity for us to serve them and to leverage state resources to get something really important done for them.
Jay Gonzalez, same question to you.
Yeah, but it's 4 years later and some still don't have it. This is like running water at this point, right? High-speed internet is critical. I go out to the Berkshires and hear stories of students who go and sit in library parking lots to do their homework because they don't have high-speed internet at home. It's totally unacceptable. And as governor, I will do whatever we need to do to get this addressed as quickly as possible. I want to say another thing. People out in Western Massachusetts, not just on this issue, but many others, often feel neglected by state government. And legitimately so. I want to be the governor of the whole state. There are a lot of other issues and challenges that they have out in Western Massachusetts that need addressing. They deserve a proportional share of the attention and resource from state government, and I'm going to give it to them. I wanted to have a debate in Western Massachusetts. The governor declined to do that. I think it's also important that we discuss issues that are important to them.
My only comeback on that would be to just point out that the Springfield Union, Springfield Republican, in their endorsement of our campaign, said that many governors have promised to pay attention to Western Mass, most don't, and that the Baker-Polito administration has more than delivered on that. And the Berkshire Eagle said something similar in their editorial, both of which we are enormously proud of.
Okay, back to Eastern Mass. Janet Wu has the next question.
Mr. Gonzalez, the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant in Plymouth is scheduled to shut down next spring. And without a federal plan to deal with the decades of nuclear waste, that means it will remain indefinitely in Plymouth. Do you worry about this? And if so, what would you do about it?
Of course I do. This is a federally regulated issue, but the governor should be actively engaged in advocating for the interests of the people of that region and of our entire state. This is a huge safety concern. public safety concern. And so we should be closing it as quickly as we can and storing the spent fuel in as safe a way as possible. My preference would be to take it off site. I know the federal government has not provided an additional site. I was glad to see that the company that owns the facility is now planning to at least get the spent fuel further away from the sea. But I would be actively engaged in this as governor. I don't think, based on what I've heard, Governor Baker has been as actively engaged. But I think this is one of those areas where we need a governor who's advocating for the values and interests of the people of this state.
Governor, you just heard Mr. Gonzalez. He said he has suggested that you have not been engaged enough in this issue. What are your plans for all this nuclear waste?
Well, our big opportunity here has been to work with the Attorney General and with a local advisory group that we put together by working with the legislature. It's a statutory community group to work with the NRC and the federal regulators on this. And there's been a lot of opportunity for the Attorney General and for people in our administration to push the federal regulators to do more and to have more people involved in this process. And we've also spent a lot of time, by the way, with Senator Warren on this. I think it's critical. I agree completely with my opponent that at the end of the day here, there are serious issues associated with the spent fuel. And our way of dealing with that has been to work with our Attorney General, that community group that we set up in statute down in that area, and our federal senators and legislators to make sure that we hold the federal government's feet to the fire on this.
All right, a climate change question. Christopher Graham, a student at UMass Boston's McCormick Graduate School, submitted this question. Here it is. The United Nations warns dramatic action is needed in the next decade to avoid global climate calamity. Does carbon pricing, a tax on carbon dioxide emissions, make sense in Massachusetts? Mr. Gonzalez.
Yes, it does. And I've been a proponent of it throughout my campaign. Spent a lot of time meeting with economists and others who, all of whom agree that we need this really important incentive to drive us to a true clean energy economy as quickly as possible. This is one area among many where I'm going to provide the bold leadership we need that we don't have right now. I'll accelerate our transition to renewable energy sources. I will oppose and do everything in my power to stop the expansion in natural gas pipeline infrastructure, which we don't need and will just further our dependence on fossil fuels. I support carbon pricing. Environmental organizations have consistently given Governor Baker's work on climate change a C grade. I'm proud to say I have the endorsements of some of those groups, including the Sierra Club, because I have a bold agenda in this area. And this is the most serious threat to our world. And this UN report that the questioner mentioned in the question shows that it is an even more serious threat and more urgent threat than we thought. We have to get serious about it.
All right, Governor Baker.
Let me just start by saying that I was honored to see that the Environmental League of Massachusetts, which is the biggest and broadest coalition of environmental organizations, chose to stay neutral in this race after hearing from both my opponent and me recently at a forum that they held because of many of the key things we've been doing in this space. We are moving aggressively away from fossil fuels. We're the ones that, as I said earlier, put a program in place that basically changed people's interest in offshore wind. And we're now going to have people all the way down the East Coast engaging in this in ways that they never did previously. In addition to that, we're the only state I know of that's making big investments alongside private entities in storage. Now, storage over time is how you take wind and solar and other intermittent energy sources and turn them into 24/7, 365 opportunities. We also have a hydro project that's going to deliver clean, renewable hydro energy here in the Commonwealth of Mass as well.
Carbon tax, yay or nay?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's right. I think the way to do this one, and we're currently having conversations with our other colleagues in New England and in the Northeast, is to try to do this the same way the RGGI program works. RGGI is a program that's done among the 6 New England states plus some of the other ones in the Mid-Atlantic area, where we basically trade on carbon for power. And it's worked really well across all the states that participate, and it's had a huge impact on carbon emissions and power. I think we have been talking to the other states about putting together a regional approach to deal with transportation.
Let's move on with an issue that really impacts a lot of families. Adrian.
Governor, I want to ask you about opioids. Governor Baker, you've boosted penalties for trafficking and clamped down on overprescribing. But how have you held the companies that have manufactured these drugs and misled your constituents about their addictive properties accountable?
Well, first of all, this isn't an issue I ran for governor to work on. It just found me. Everywhere I went in the Commonwealth, I was running into moms and dads and brothers and sisters with really just heartbreaking stories about this epidemic. And I'm proud of the work we've done on this. We're a national leader on fighting the opioid epidemic here in the Commonwealth, and have done so on a bipartisan basis with our colleagues in the legislature. The biggest and best way for us to support efforts to crack down on opioid manufacturers was to work with the Attorney General, Maura Healey, and to make sure she had all the data that she needed to create what most people are calling the most comprehensive, detailed, and significant lawsuit that's been filed by any state against Purdue Pharma. And I'm really proud of the work that we did in conjunction with her office on that, and I was proud to stand with her at her press conference when she announced it.
Mr. Gonzalez, what would you do to hold these companies responsible?
But you want to replace her with Jay McMahon. I would work very closely with the Attorney General to go after the pharmaceutical companies who are a huge part of this problem. They were marketing these addictive pills without telling people they were addictive. And they should be paying for a lot of the costs and treatment resources we need to deal with this crisis. And this is a crisis. I appreciate the fact the governor has made the opioid crisis a priority. But we need to be much more aggressive in taking it on. In addition to working with the Attorney General to go after pharmaceutical companies, I would expand the treatment resources we have. We don't have nearly enough to meet the demand for treatment. I think we need to try new things like safe injection sites covering medical marijuana as an alternative pain management therapy to these addictive pills. I think we need to stop treating people who are addicted like criminals. The governor keeps sending people who are civilly committed for treatment, haven't committed a crime, to a Department of Corrections facility in Plymouth where they're overseen by corrections officials and not getting the treatment they need. I will shut that down.
Let's move on. Anthony.
Gentlemen, over the years, Massachusetts has pioneered a number of big ideas. We established the first public school. This was the state that made gay marriage legal, the first state. It established Romney Care, which morphed into the Affordable Care Act. So, Jay Gonzalez, let me start with you. What is the big idea that would define your governorship?
Well, there are many. I'm
looking for one.
Anthony, I want us to be that Massachusetts, where we have a governor who's actually being ambitious and aspirational about what we can accomplish. So I have a lot of different aspects of my agenda that I think would fit into that category. But one of the most important is to be the first to give every child and family in this state access to high-quality child care and preschool. This is game-changing for young kids in terms of their success in school and in life, and it allows parents to go to work to support their families. We're the most expensive state in the country. What I'm proposing and what I will do by the end of my first term is ensure that every child and family from 0 to age 5, birth to age 5, not just preschool, will have access to high-quality, affordable child care and preschool, and we will get that done.
Governor Baker, the big idea that would define your second term.
I think the biggest one is this climate change issue. We've been in the process of doing municipal vulnerability planning exercises, as I said earlier, with all 351 cities and towns. This is a national program that we put together. Nobody else has done anything like this, and many other states are adopting it. Once it's done, we'll do hazard mitigation planning for all those communities, and then once we have that, that's the blueprint for dealing with climate change here in the Commonwealth. And I think in many respects, this has urgency. It needs to get done, and we are setting a national framework that many other states are grabbing onto and pursuing on their own. That comes on the heels, by the way, of creating a national model for how to deal with the opioid epidemic, and as I said earlier, a national sort of rush to offshore wind because of the work that we did creating the first affordable offshore wind project in the US.
Go ahead, Mr. Gonzalez.
There isn't anyone who follows what's happening on climate change and what we're doing in this state who thinks that the governor is being ambitious enough on this. Other states are starting to and will be outpacing us if we stay on his schedule. We need to be much more aggressive in developing offshore wind, in getting rid of constraints on solar development, which the governor put in place, which have reduced the rate at which solar is being developed, and where we've actually lost 3,000 jobs in the solar industry in the last year alone. I'm going to be bold on this issue and many on early education and care, single-payer health care, a lot of different issues where we should be a leader, and we will be when I'm governor.
All right, speed round.
So he spent that $1 billion 5 times since this debate started. He spent it 3 times in transportation. He just spent it again on early childhood ed. He'll spend it later on K through 12 education. It's dishonest to stand here in front of the voters, say you're going to be bold, and then talk about initiatives that cost billions of dollars that you don't have the dollars to pay for. What I've talked about in very specific detail are things we've either already done or things we're planning to do that are already programmed and budgeted. And I don't think it's fair for him to tell the voters that he can do A, B, and C, and he's going to be bold, and not have the resources to actually deliver on.
Quickly, Mr. Gonzalez.
Going to single-payer health care will save us money if we do it thoughtfully. And yes, it is being bold. And I have a specific plan to raise the money we need to do the things that I want to do that will cost more money. What's not being honest is you keep telling people you've got a 15-year plan to fix the T, and yet when you had to tell the truth to the federal government, you told them you couldn't do it in 15 years, it's 25 years. So are you being truthful to the federal government or truthful to the people of Massachusetts?
So the 2016 and 17 plan that we gave to the feds, which was based on what we were left with, said 25 years. The recent data, because we spent so much money on our repair backlog this past year and the year before, is 15 years. And we're the ones that put the Fiscal Management Control Board in place that meets every week in front of the public and gives people access to all the information they need. What he's talking about is old data that's no longer relevant. It's a 15-year plan.
June 2017, 2 months after you told the public it would be 15 years.
It's 15 years.
And 15 years is ridiculous.
All right, you know what? Really quickly, speed round questions. It's the last one. We've gone from 5 now to 1, and they actually told me to move past it. But 3 words to describe your opponent, and you'll do the same. Go.
Status quo governor.
Smart, ambitious, and public servant.
Okay. The hour is sped by. We need to move to closing. Your closing arguments very quickly here. You each have 60 seconds. The coin toss decided. Mr. Gonzalez goes first.
Thank you. I've run into a lot of people who say they think Charlie Baker's doing a good job. But when I ask them why they think so, the answer is never that he's doing a great job fixing our transportation system or making progress on some other issue that affects people's lives. It's usually something like, he seems nice, and I'm really glad he isn't one of those crazy right-wing extremists. Well, the measure of whether our governor's doing a good job shouldn't be that he's nice and isn't crazy. This is not the time to lower our expectations. It's time to raise them. I'll provide the bold leadership we need to make a difference for working families in this state and to stand up against Donald Trump's hateful agenda. I know I'm the little guy in this election, literally and figuratively. But I also know that little guys have overcome overwhelming odds when their cause is just, they aim high, work hard, and support each other along the way. Don't let anyone tell you this election's been decided and that your vote doesn't matter.
Okay, that's your 60 seconds.
Thank you very much. I hope to earn your vote on November 6th.
Governor Baker, last word.
Well, first of all, I want to start by thanking the consortium again for hosting this debate, and I want to thank the audience for listening. I also want to say how much I appreciate the opportunity I've had over the past 4 years to get to know the people of Massachusetts. The time that I've spent traveling this Commonwealth, listening to your thoughts and your concerns and incorporating those into the way we build policy and get things done has been a true joy for me, and I know for the Lieutenant Governor as well. One of the things we pledged to do when we took office was that we would work together with our colleagues in local government and in state government to move this Commonwealth forward. Our economy is booming, our schools are terrific, but the final thing I want to say tonight is that our people are great, and I hope you give us a chance to continue the work we're doing on November 6th. Thank you.
Governor Baker, thank you very much. Mr. Gonzalez, thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists.
By the way, early voting ends tomorrow. Election Day, you know, is Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining us. Good evening, everybody.